Really is great to see you. Thank you so much all for coming. My name's Peter Williams. I'm the warden at Tyndale House, which I don't know what it means, but I've been trying to work that out for the last 7 years. And I think I'm supposed to be responsible for things that happen here, and really grateful that so many of you have come. For some of you, you've been involved with Cuba for Christ for some time, others less. Some of you know well what Tyndale House and some don't, but whether you're very connected or just have come along, it's really great to have you here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Tyndale House, and if anyone wants a tour of the library later, I'm very happy to lead that. It'll only take a few minutes. Tyndale House began in 1944 here in Selwyn Gardens, which was on the edge of Cambridge, as Cambridge then was, but Cambridge has gradually been moving over towards us. And it began as a centre to raise up evangelical and biblical scholars. It was at a time when there were hardly any evangelical and biblical scholars, and certainly none who actually taught in universities in the UK. And it began with the idea of having this old house there with a senior scholar there mentoring younger scholars. And there were maybe 6 or 8 as it began. It's grown over the years, and now we have 59 spaces in our library, fully occupied, with about 30 people in that library doing PhDs at any one time. And our aim is to raise up Bible scholars to serve the church. We don't generally run courses, although you'll be hearing that there has been a course run recently for our Cuban friends, but that's something we're very open to do. But we are essentially a study centre. I think we are the largest library of the Bible which is in evangelical hands in the world, in terms of something that's really focused on knowing what we can about the Bible. So in the library you'll find archaeological reports, you will find things that will help you know very precise things about the language. What we don't tend to have is lots of nice paperbacks written by pastors, which are very worthy books, but don't have primary information. Our idea is simply to have primary historical information so that people can study that together, and recognising that community and environment are one of the most formative things that we experience. So often when people do a PhD and they're entirely isolated, they're on their own, they don't know that there are any other Bible believers, any other evangelicals around, they feel really isolated, they feel they need to abandon their faith. And what we've experienced over the years is that when people are studying together and accountable together, it really makes all of the difference, and people are, have gone out from here to serve the church worldwide. So there are different ways of thinking of Tyndale House. You could think of it as a missionary society based on a library. You could think of it as a leadership training centre. Some days you might think of it as a rehab centre for academics. But we work very hard and quietly in the library, and then twice a day at 11 and 4 every day, the gong sounds in the library. People come out for coffee. We also have many communal events, and we enjoy deep relationships. And we are blessed with owning various property around here at the back and beyond. So the site was bought for £4,000 back in 1944, and one dreads to think what it's worth now. So it's great to have that history. What we're committed to, I would describe as historic general evangelicalism. Historic in the sense that we're not trying to revise the gospel or our commitments to the Bible. General in the sense that we're not denominational. We love denominations. Denominations are really great because they show that people believe in something. But there are times, aren't there, when we need to rise above those denominations where we have our passionate views about certain important things, and we say there's an even bigger picture to have, and that's where the global church needs to work together. And one of the really exciting things for me about this Cuban project has been the interdenominational nature of it, that there is a bigger picture with Cuba than any one denomination. So how Tyndale House has been working over the years is you have a library, you have people who come to pursue their studies, often a degree, sometimes beyond a degree. But of course, once you have that, you can actually bolt on all sorts of extra things. Once you've got that many people generating ideas. So one of the things that happened in this room is most of the work on the English Standard Version of the Bible happened in here. We've started up biblical software, stepbible.org, if you want to have a look at that. We run conferences and other such things. And when Brother Stefan said to me, you know, there's a real need in Cuba and we need to be helping to train Cuban leaders in biblical language, that was a no-brainer, because it's an obvious fit with what we're doing. Right from the beginning, there's been an emphasis on learning the primary languages of the Bible so that you can study it really close up. And when I learned a little bit more about Cuba, it was very exciting, because to learn that the church is growing very fast and these people are very under-resourced, and to realise that here was an opportunity to get in, if I can call it, in a relatively early stage, building a foundation for these people to have a really solid understanding of the biblical languages, was very exciting. And one of the reasons it's exciting was because of Wales. In 1904, there was, of course, the Great Welsh Revival, where the churches just grew tremendously. And one of the results of the Welsh Revival was a huge growth in theological liberalism. Because what happened is, of course, the generation that had been converted, often many of them wanted to learn more. And so they wanted to learn more, but where would they learn more? They would learn more from people who actually weren't fully committed to the Bible. They might have been a little bit committed to the Bible, if you know what that means. And gradually what we see is that within a generation, a large liberal movement of Old Testament scholars, particularly in Wales, founding the Society of Old Testament Studies, which is a very prestigious society now, but is a largely secularly minded society. I'm a member of that. And what I was excited about here is the thought that, in this case, those who are really committed to the authority of the Scriptures would be the people who get the higher training first. And so to know that what we have with our brothers and sisters, as they have been really working very hard on their Hebrew, and even I had the privilege earlier this week of giving them a Moabite lesson, is to know that they are going to be able to handle things that many secular colleagues won't. We expect one day that communism will fall in Cuba, and after that, what will happen? Well, all the pornography will flood in, and all sorts of other things, including lots of heretical teaching, which already may be there, but it will only increase. And to know that there are people who've really trained very hard at this stage is exciting as what we might call a prophylactic, something to guard against that. And so it's very exciting to be partnering with Cuba for Christ. I've hardly met Carl Chambers at all, but we've just known from the beginning that we're on the same page, and we've just exchanged a few emails, and you know, it's great to work in that common environment. And this year it's been Hebrew, but we need to think, well, what next? There are other languages the Bible was written in, particularly Greek, but there's also Aramaic, and there are lots of other things to study about the Bible other than just the languages. And so we're really just beginning something now, and it's been a great privilege, very enriching for the people at Tyndale House to have so many good friends from Cuba come here. I know their families have made sacrifices, and we want to ask them to give our thanks to their families for making those sacrifices. And we also want to thank them for enriching our lives, and thank you all for coming. Yeah.
And thank you not only for coming, thank you, all of you are here because you've been supporting this project in Prague and in finance. Hula, thank you very much for coming to represent DVM. We haven't got anyone here from Advancing Native Missions in America, but we will send them a tape of this. So as you look around, you're seeing a room full of people who, as Pete said, are in Cuba on the ground floor, if you like, at raising up a generation of better able, already committed to the gospel, but even better educated scholars. And these 10, they don't know which order I'm about to call them up in, so that's why they're all looking a little bit nervous. So Moises, come and introduce yourself, please.
It's not funny to go first. Well, my name is Moises Perez Padron. I am married to Kesia Quintana Tiaga, and we have 7 months of marriage. I am 29 years old and she is 19 years old. She is studying her career in the University of Havana, psychology. We live in Batabanó. The place is located 60 kilometers at south of Havana. It is a small town with a population of about 10,000 people. The majority of them are farmers and fishermen. I belong to the Western Baptist Convention. My main ministry is being a pastor in this place. The Baptist church where I work has 175 members and a community of 50 among new believers and people that like to participate in our services. Also, I am a teacher in the Baptist Theological Seminary of Havana, where Pastor Barbaro is now the principal. And my subject has been Hebrew during these last 6 years. Some years ago, I was teaching history of the church for 8 months. For me, it has been very important to be in this course of Hebrew. As a professor of Hebrew in our seminary, my big problem was to teach something that I really don't know very well. Now I have a better preparation, and my seminary will have good results in biblical languages because this preparation. My students will see how to understand in a better way the Hebrew in the Old Testament. I hope to return to teach Hebrew full time in my seminary and to serve other seminaries in the same way. This is my second coming to Tyndale House, and I always have the same feeling. I don't know anything. But it is good for me to be conscious about this reality because it makes me to study harder. In Tyndale House, I have had the opportunity of my life, that is to study Greek and to study Hebrew. God has made real my dream. I like to see how those people here use very wise their time. I wish I could to be so disciplined and to have the same environment that people have in this country for doing biblical studies. If there is something that I have missed from Cuba, has been my family, especially my wife. To be separated so long hasn't been easy because the only resource that we have had is email. Because we don't have internet, it is not possible to access to some programs like Skype for seeing and talking with her. But thank you because your help and support has been very useful. So God bless you.
Well, while the 10 amigos and amigas come up to tell you a little bit about themselves, I'm just going to tell you what we've been up to week by week. So, what have we been doing here? Let me tell you how this all started. Last summer, 3 Cubans came over to Tyndale House and were taught a bit of basic Hebrew by a number of lecturers. And they have gone home and have started teaching between them more than 50 people, including members of youth groups, including lecturers at university at all levels. There's been that hunger. Many of those 50 chose to sit an entrance exam to come to this intensive course. And originally this was working with 2 denominations. Word spread, we didn't advertise, and 6 denominations got on board as well. Now there are only about 12 evangelical denominations in Cuba. So we've got about half of them represented in this room. Now that means that while most people preparing for that exam had about 7 months, 8 only had about a week. So I'm about to show you their results, but please remember that a lot of those I was really looking for, okay, what have you learned in a week? And some of them were superstars. They had learned enough in a week to do significant progress. So what did the exam cover? Roughly what you would do in 1 term of a seminary here in the UK, of a good seminary that's focused on Hebrew and teaching it at a good rate, but requiring a lot more detail and requiring them to go not only Hebrew into Spanish, but Spanish into Hebrew. Now, that's not only because Pete Williams has taught me how to be a master torturer. It's because these guys aren't learning how to translate the Bible into Spanish. That's been done. They're learning how to understand the Hebrew, and they need to be able to look at a sentence and say, I wouldn't have put it that way. I would have written it like this, so why is it put like this? So that's why they've been working not just at, okay, I can read this now, but understanding how Hebrew gets written. Here are their results. On average, of the 10 who are in the room, more than 50%. In a 3-hour exam, more grueling than anything I've ever faced, frankly. That's the liberty you have when you're setting the exam. Top of the class, 90%, which is simply staggering. And the least of the superstars, in 1 week, managed to get 20% in effectively a 1 term of very grueling and exacting Hebrew. So that's the basis on which our 10 amigos are here. Elizabeth, you're up.
Okay, my name is Elizabeth Rodriguez Espinosa, and I am 37 years old. My husband's name is Kendry, and we have a son called Kevin Isaac, who is 1 year and a half. We live in Matanzas City, 100 kilometers from Havana City, where we work for New Pines denomination. My husband is pastor there and the director of the filial of our seminary. We are both teachers, so Hebrew will be my new subject to teach, having also like goal reproducing this tool in other Hebrew and Old Testament teachers. That's hard for us finding volunteer teachers willing to go to our country and stay for a long time to teach biblical languages. That's why I'm here, paying the cost of missing my family, especially my little one, because I think it's worth of my efforts, and this will be, a huge blessing for many people in our country. I'm very grateful to God for giving me this opportunity, and also to all of you guys for being part of this. All for God's kingdom's sake. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. May God bless you as you keep serving Him.
So, at the end of our first week, how did they do? What did they learn in 5 days? Well, one of the things we've been reading is the Bible without any changes, what I call the jungle, so that they can see the language for real. At the beginning of the week, in our hour's worth of Bible reading, in Jonah they managed to read 2.5 words. Those ones there. We didn't quite get to the end of the divine name, so now the word of the look came, and then we had to stop. By the end of the week, in an hour of class time, half of us. So, arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it. Grammar, in that first week, we were revising what they'd already done back in Cuba, but tons of complicated noun forms, lots of other bits. What I'm going to really show you in terms of progress is the Hebrew verb, because you can really see visually how their grasp of the language grows that way. So if you happen to know Hebrew, we've learned the whole of the Cal Perfect by that stage. This simply means that you can say quite simply, something happened in the past. They're able to say things like, or read things like, the army of the enemy is innumerable. They have as many warriors as the stars in the sky. Hebrew is a very friendly language. It's all about killing and butchering. If you've ever learned French or Spanish or Latin or a foreign language like that, you'll know that in English we say he did something, she did something, and so on. In Hebrew and those other languages, you change the single word itself. So it'd be nice if you simply had to learn these 9 words to learn to say, this happened in the past. But as well as the regular verb in Hebrew, you have 10 families of irregular verbs. So by the end of the first week, they had to learn this. And they did. You're done.
Sorry, no speak English.
My name is Jordanis Diaz. I'm 36 years old. I'm married to Navexi Perez. She is 34 years old. And we have 3 boys. Amitai, 11 years. Abimael, 8 years. And Abiud, 3 years. We live in Havana and serve as pastors of the Christian Reformed Church Emmanuel, is the name. I have been in ministry for 15 years. I am a professor of the Reformed Seminary in Cuba, which has only been in existence for 8 years. I also serve as the director of the Old People Home for Church. Pastoral life in Cuba is somewhat difficult, but God has always opened doors and can help our economic situation. I work from time to time with my brother in a small business which makes floor tiles. It has been a blessing for me to be on this Hebrew course. In honesty, for our seminary and for me personally, we needed this preparation. It is a blessing for being here and given the necessary tools to be able to read the Bible in Hebrew and all that this implies for my ministry. I thank the Ministry of Cuba para Cristo and Carl Chalmers for the vision. I also thank the Professor Stephen for his dedication and patience. I also thank each one of you who has made this dream possible for us. When I return to Cuba, I will continue teaching Hebrew in our seminary, but now I will be truly well prepared. Our seminary is 2 hours from Havana. In due course, we will be opening an extension of our seminary in Havana, where I also be teaching. This trip has been an extraordinary experience for my life, and also for my ministry. It has been very expressive to me to find that there are many people in Tyndale House who can read the Bible in its original language with ease, and to see the great passion for the study of biblical languages. Something that we have a great challenge to implement and bring to life in Cuba. It has been a very good and useful time in spite of missing my family in Cuba so much, but it has been very valuable at the same time. It only remains for me to say thank you, and thank you. May God bless you greatly.
Week 2, how are we doing? So, still reading Jonah, 1.5 verses per hour-long classroom reading session. So, that lot is now easy for them. It only takes them an hour to decipher those little scribbles from right to left. It's not an easy language. You can see how much text that is in English. What does the verb look like? Well, the blue bit is what they knew at the end of week 1. You can see it's more or less doubled by week 2. Not getting any easier either. The other thing that we've added in week 2 is chunks of the book of Genesis which have been simplified by the textbook so that only things that we have learnt in grammar are there. So alongside real Bible and Jonah, meeting things we haven't studied yet, we've got something that looks a lot like the Bible, but devoid of things that they can't possibly know. So in that same hour, 5 verses of Genesis, okay, simplified, but you can see it's not a small chunk of text, alongside a verse and a half of Jonah. Yeah, amen.
Yeah. Well, good afternoon. I really feel happy I stay here. Well, my name is Jaime Romagrava. I am 35 years old. My wife's name is Silvia, and we have a boy named Daniel, and he is 13 years old. We live in the capital, Havana, just 30 minutes from the capital and 30 minutes from the Baptist Seminary of Havana. We are pastors in the village of Diezmero, a place where there is delinquency and poverty. We live about 1 hour by bus from the church because our church has no home for the pastor. Despite being a pastor, in my overtime work at home as baker and pastor. Well, I do all pastoring. If you like, yeah. What I do from 5 o'clock until 12 p.m. After my schedule, then is that I do the work of the church. As I am my own boss every month, I change my schedule because I teach at the Baptist Seminary of Havana several subjects, and I need to make my own adjustment. Not only did I just for the reason, but also because my wife teaches other subjects in the same seminary, and we alternate work at home. Yeah. Right now, I have a good relationship with my seminary, in which I teach Hebrew, among other subjects, but also help several brothers who are other denominations to prepare students and future teachers of Hebrew. I remind you that our seminary does not have sufficient resources to sustain teachers. Therefore, like many other teachers of other seminaries, we serve God giving free lessons to a student regardless of the distance we have to resort. When I return, I will be teaching several groups of students, and even there are some that come to my house to study Hebrew. We have commitments to teach in other seminars and dream to have a community of readers of Hebrew in Cuba, to be in the very near future the next Theologian's Bible. Our to analyze the Word of God starting from the original language like Hebrew or Greek, with a balance of conservative biblical theology. I am so much love having Tyndale toward people who attend here, regardless of origin, race, or denomination. The quality of workers, the comfortable installation, and magnificent books that is made in a Bible study center which has no equal. Yeah, Tyndale House is a good place. Yeah, this is my second visit here. Yeah, I like it so much. For me, the most important after God is family. And that's what I miss in my country. I miss my wife Sylvia and my son Daniel. I think with them about well, I think with them about it would have been best student, best friend, and best Christian. Yeah, thank you.
End of week 3. How are we doing reading Jonah? Only 2 verses per day, so that's not a lot faster. Why? Because now we know more grammar. So less of the stuff is me telling them, let me tell you what this means, and more you tell me what it means, but it's still increasing. So that chunk of flies landing on parchment that we've decided to decipher, decent chunk of English text. The verb, still growing. You can see the font size is getting smaller. I can't even read it from here. The new stuff is the black on the edge and at the bottom, short back and sides. Simplified Genesis, not quite so simplified anymore. And now we're up to 11 verses. So in an hour in class, 11 verses of simplified Genesis, 2 verses of Jonah. Those of you who've learned Hebrew know this is not a slow rate of progress. One of the great things, as they're telling you about Tyndale House, is that you really get to be inspired as well as encouraged by other scholars who are working here. So every week we've had 2 or 3 Hebrew scholars in the class for 10 minutes, sharing with us why they learned Hebrew, what they're doing with it, what they're about. One of the mission agencies that is supporting this project is called A&M, Advancing Native Missions in the US. They specialize in helping churches in countries get ready for Islam. And so Tony Weedle is a Liberian convert from Islam. He can't go back to Liberia because his family will try and kill him. And he's now based in the US, but he came and gave us an hour of Welcome to Islam, and he will be touring Cuba doing week-long seminars in different locations to prepare the church for when Muslims become a greater force there. We're very grateful to A&M for supporting the project and for helping the church in Cuba. in that way. Yolis.
What is my English? My name is Yolis Rodriguez del Rio. I'm 40 and was converted to the Lord Jesus in 1999. I've been married for 13 years to Omar Olivares, who is 32. We have 3 children. Joshua is the eldest, 12. Our girl is Sheila, 6. And Joel Isaac is the youngest, at 3. Currently, we live in the city of Colombia, in the province of Las Tunas, some 650 kilometers from Havana. I've been serving the Lord full-time for 13 years, first in my local church in Santiago, and then since 2007 as a pastor, graduated from the Eastern Baptist Seminary in Cuba. I'm currently in my second pastorate. The first was in the countryside of Sagua Aletana. At the local level, I am a professor in the church where I pastor. One of the reasons for coming to Cambridge to study Hebrew is to be used in my denomination as a professor in the seminary or one of its extensions. Also to teach the leaders and pastors in the city where I work. There are 5 interests, and in the preparation of my Bible studies and daily devotional Bible readings. Tyndale has impressed me with dedication to study and the preparation of all its members. I miss my family. It's not easy to be away from them for 2 months. Thanks be to God for using you to help us overcome our needs. It is amazing how much Hebrew I have learned in this time. I'm sure that the efforts of everyone are not in vain. Blessings.
Week 4, by the end of it, how much are we reading in an hour? Well, Jonah, we're up to 5 verses. Font is getting smaller. That's a fairly big chunk. Hebrew verb is padding out. It's not getting any slimmer. Genesis, really only light touches to the text now. Most of it is familiar, and we're up to, as you can see, 13 verses. Fairly small font now in order to fit on there. And one of the most generous supporters of this project has been the Drenthe Mission Board from the Netherlands, and I'd love to invite Cuba to come and speak to us a little bit on their behalf, if that's possible.
Well, thank you. I'm very glad to be here. We learned from Stefan via Walter, I think, about this Cuba project, and we were asked to sponsor the project. I'm very glad to be here this afternoon to learn a little bit more about you guys. Very nice that you can tell us about your background. I'll go back to Holland and I'll give them your stories, and I'll explain to them why it's so important to help you with your studies, and we are very glad to be a part of this. And well, I hope you can send me later on. You can maybe send me some pictures and stuff, so we can tell the people in Holland about all this. Yep. And well, thank you very much, and God bless you all.
Thank you.
learn Cuban English. Okay, my name is Boris Sarlavos. I'm 29 years old. I'm from Pinal del Rio, Cuba. This city is 85 miles away from Havana City, and it's called the Mecca of tobacco, the land of the best tobacco on the world. The people know this city for this name. I am vice dean and full-time professor in our seminary, Los Cedros del Líbano. I was pastor for 8 years in a church before going to the seminary to work. I'm married for 10 years. The name of my wife is Ana Maris, and she is 29 years old. We have two daughters, Jokabed and Sofia. They are 5 and 1 year old. I work with the Free Will Baptist Convention in Cuba. Our seminary has a deep need in a biblical language because for many years the Cuban government don't give permission to open our seminary after they closed in the 1958 for repairs. In 1988, the seminary started again with poor quality among the professors for many years. After the last 10 years, our seminary growing in the training of leaderships and pastors of our convention. Now, our more big need is the biblical language. Is my purpose help our seminary and help other seminaries in Cuba growing in the biblical language. The most important impression for me in Tyndale House is the big library and the intention for help the church to grow. The people are special and the time here is wonderful. I tell to my friends in Cuba, I learned in Tyndale House not only Hebrew, much more. Cambridge is wonderful, many history, and I love the history. You have a nice country. I miss in Cuba, my family and my work. I love teach, and now love more because I can teach the Bible, in the original language. God bless you.
Week 5, every student's nightmare. Revision week, with an optional R. So, by now pretty much every type of Hebrew sentence is something that they face, not necessarily every verb form, but every way of putting words together is something they should be familiar with. We've memorized 330 verb forms. We have learned 429 words of vocab apart from that we've encountered in Jonah and Genesis. We've built up a decent reading speed. In an hour in class, 5 verses of the real Bible in Jonah and 15 verses of lightly simplified Bible. So about 20 verses, collaboratively, but in an hour, that's not bad at all. And a real treat, Stephen Levinson, who I think has to get the accolade for the most understatedly omnicompetent man I have ever met. He has served as a Bible translation consultant on how many languages, Stephen? About 450. Did you all hear that? So when he tells us that most languages in the world work like this, and therefore if Hebrew didn't, it would be really exceptional, we believe him. Stephen, during that revision week, very kindly gave them 2 hours, two 2-hour classes and then another 2 hours later on. He'll be back in May doing that. And he's really the expert in that question I opened with of, okay, well if an author puts it like this instead of like this, why? Why are the words in that order? Why has this been put here? And that has been really, I think, for you guys inspiring, hasn't it? To see that your students and your kids could one day turn into somebody with the expertise not only of a Pete Williams, but of a Stephen Levinson. Thank you, Stephen, very much. So at the end of week 5, they had their placement exam to determine which 6 of the 10 would be most suitable, would profit the most from coming back to term 2. So the idea is that the other 4 go back and immediately start to teach the many, many Cubans who they left behind, eager for more teaching. The 6 who come go to the next level and then return to teach the 4 who didn't come back, and then everybody else. So this really is, what you're seeing here is the faculty of Hebrew in Cuba, who are not only going to be teaching in seminaries and teaching seminary graduates, but also trying to identify their own successors, more people who can quickly and competently learn Hebrew and become good Hebrew scholars. The exam consisted, apart from an hour of grammar, in 2 hours they had to translate a chapter of Hebrew prophetic narrative. Those of you with Hebrew in the room are pulling up the corners of your mouth, either to smile or in disbelief. That's not easy. Lightly simplified to remove things that we hadn't learned yet. The Cubans are smiling in a different way at me right now. Here they are, sweating through it. Right there, in fact, yeah. This is the beginning of the passage. More sweat, more despair on my left here. Here is the middle of the passage. Here are the final touches, and here is the end of the passage. So that's the whole of Ezekiel 9, with a fair bit of, visionary activity in the temple, like a newborn being held by her mother. Here they are smiling, holding her hand. So, what level was the exam in roughly in UK terms? At the seminary that I attended, this would be about the Hebrew grammar you'd learn in a year and a half if you chose to do Hebrew. And the rate of reading and translating in exam conditions would be easily that of a third year at my seminary. Well, that's all very well, but how did they do? Now, you remember they began with that spread of some 90% of the entrance exam, average about 50, some down at 20. Things have got a lot harder. 3 or 4 times more grammar. I'm demanding more speed, better and faster of them. So of course their results went down, right? Because it's a lot harder. No. The average of the 10 went from just over 50 to well over 70%. So they're getting 2/3 of everything right. The top of the class went from just under 90 to above 90. And this is why we were right to pick the superheroes who'd only had a week to prepare. Because from basically knowing nothing about nothing, 20% about a little, they've gone to know, do you see that? That 65% is the bottom of the class of 3rd year, 2nd year, seminary level Hebrew, and they've done it in 4 weeks and 1 week of revision. I think we need to give them a round for this. Our other sponsors, the Banner of Truth, very kindly gave them each 4 Spanish books as a little prize for completing that exam. Ibis.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ibis Belmontero Olivares. My family consists of my father, mother, my brother, and myself. I work in La Caoba Church in Santiago de Cuba while I am studying in the Theological Baptist Seminary to be a missionary. Santiago is about 9,800 kilometers east of Havana. I am most grateful to our God, to the ministry of Cuba para Cristo, Tyndale House, and all of you who have contributed to this project. Tyndale has brought me an opportunity that I have never had in Cuba. There are many excellent specialists here that have helped bring the best out of me, and have motivated me to gain a better knowledge of God's Word. My goal at Tyndale is to develop my skill at reading the Bible in Hebrew. But I have broadened my knowledge in a whole variety of ways because Tyndale is like a family, and many people have helped me in my studies. My present aim is to obey our God. My immediate and future plans are in His hands. When I return to Cuba, I will teach Hebrew in my seminary, because we don't have Hebrew teachers there at present. In future, I will be a pastor or a missionary and simultaneously teach at the seminary, like other teachers there, because they work as a pastor's church, as a church pastor, because we don't have full-time teachers there. The biggest weakness of Cuban ministry is the knowledge of biblical language. Even in our seminary, we don't have biblical language teachers so that we can learn. I think it would be very important for Cuban people to have the opportunity to study biblical language. However, until today, that is something that has been impossible for us. Being at Tyndale, I have realized that study to biblical language is not optional, but necessary. I have been reading, studying, and teaching the Bible for many years, but now we can see many things that we have never seen before. So thank you to all of you for giving us this opportunity. God bless you.
Week 6. Jonah, how are we doing? Still 5 verses per day, but now we're also reading Genesis completely unedited. So we're up to about 15 verses of raw Bible per day in class. Here's Genesis 44, 18 to 26, alongside 5 verses of Jonah. Here's our verb chart. In a week it trebled. For those of you with Hebrew, we've gone from kal and nifal to adding pl, kual, hofal and hifil.
Hello. My English is bad, but no worry. I came to translate to Spanish. My name is Maria Luis Aguilar Rodriguez. I am married to Rosa Maria. We have twins, 24A. Record the names. The first is Alejandro. He's 4 years in the mechanical engineer in the university. And the other is Evelio. It's the first year of pastor minister in our seminary. I live in San Antonio de los Baños, and the province is Artemisa, about 30 minutes south of Havana. I am currently pastor of the Cuban Mission to the World Mission Church in San Antonio, as well as beginning rector of our denomination seminary in Las Palmas, and part of the team of professors in Old Testament. While being here, they have given the responsibility to president of our denomination in Cuba. I am studying on the intensive course because of the pressing need to train people who can, in a serious and responsible way, communicate the teaching of the Word of God to our students and future leaders, who tell us we have the responsibility to do the same with other generations. Inspiration to the 2 Timothy 2:2, where Paul tells to Timothy, the thing you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, in truth to reveal people who will also qualify to each other. When one of our students in our seminary to be formed on the premise of the biblical language, knowing that with this we will rewarding the purity to biblical doctrine. Brother, this minister, of which you are part with your prayer and contribution has come to be for us like a manna in the desert. Timidly and necessary to go to forward with our responsibility in the preaching the gospel in Cuba and the world. Thank you very much.
Mario is probably the chief illustration of why it has been so necessary, using the hospitality of Tyndale House, to bring the 10 over here to study. You might think it might be better to study this more at leisure with less intensity in Cuba, but everybody here is already at least a pastor or married to a pastor or a youth worker, and additionally in their spare time a lecturer in a seminary. If we had gone and found a cabin somewhere in the middle of Cuba and said, okay, come away from all that and study here, well, Mario was already not just a church planter, but a seminary planter, as is Onel, as is Elizabeth's husband. Mario, while he was here, had already been chosen to be the next president of his denomination, and in week 4, the outgoing president fell ill. So had we been in Cuba, Mario would have just had to up and leave, as would half the class by now, through various pressures. So really, locking them in England without permission to go back before their airfare has been really the only way realistically to do this. You might be thinking, why has nobody done this before? Well, people have tried to do it in Cuba. It just doesn't work. Life is far too hard for them on the ground there. Look around you. Not many pastors in this country have got competent Hebrew and Greek. It's not only in Cuba that there's a problem. That's why we're so grateful to Tyndale House for laying on the facilities here and the encouragement, and to all of you for providing the kind of counterintuitive funding that we've needed. But I hope you can see that the results are terrific. Speaking of which, week 7.
Yeah.
19 verses of 1 Samuel 8, not in the least bit simplified. I really need a magnifying glass to see what's going on there. But you can see it's a good chunk of Hebrew Bible. And the Hebrew verb has doubled and a half again. Those are honestly Hebrew verbs. It's not just me drawing on the screen randomly. It is far too small a thing for these people to come here and learn one Semitic language. So we taught them two. Pete Williams came and gave them more or less everything there is to know about Moabites yesterday afternoon between 2 and 3 p.m. That is more or less the Moabite that exists in the world. And they were immensely quick, weren't they, picking up the alphabet, reading it, recognizing words, translating it. So this is a different alphabet with no vowels in a foreign language. And an hour in they could read it. These are, the cream of Cuba is what we've been sent here, including Fernando.
Se fue.
Se fue Fernando. Ok.
He's only up to back.
¿Quién no ha estado todavía? Venga, ven.
Thank you. I thank God, who is in His mercy, love, and mercy, has permitted me to be here. I also want to thank those of you who have given time to share with us. We are together in this moment like a large family with desire for Christ to be Cuban, to be for Christ. I am called Onel Pardillo. I am 42 and happily married to Tania Leiva Diaz. In our love, God had given us two precious treasures, a girl called Beatrice, who is now 7, and a boy of 12 called Jonathan. Both are at a school in the first and sixth year respectively. I live with my family in a town called Hatibonico, which is in the central province of Santi Espiritus, about 2,050 miles from Havana, or 5 hours by car. The area has 40,000 people and is known for its sugar cane factory, which is the main economic activity of the area. I am the pastor of the Second Baptist Church in Hatibonico, as well as being professor of Hebrew and Old Testament in the local outpost of the Baptist Theological Seminary, which we have for the last 4 years. We have 8 students in this outpost in their 4 years of the course, and this October they will graduate as pastor in our convention. Also, in our church, in my church, we have a Bible Institute under the auspice of the Eastern Baptist Seminary. We have 25 students, church leaders and missionary lay workers in this institute who are received training to plant churches in the world central zone of the country and to work in the congregation. Many of these are already leading and church and serving, and all they need is theological training to be more effective in their ministries. When I return to Cuba, I will be teaching a second level of Hebrew to students from the pastoral ministry course, and I'll teach introduction of the Old Testament to the students from the Bible Institute. The thing that has most impressed me about Tyndale House has been the important library you have and the possibility of such deep research in biblical themes which can be developed. I can't live among your staff who are such lovely, friendly people. I have missing most is my family in Cuba. It's most important for me. Thank you. God bless you.
Yeah. Well, we've got a week of Hebrew to go, but what happens after that? They get a term break. This is, of course, the ministerial sense of break. It's important for those coming back to have time away in Cuba to experience, okay, so what's it like to try and keep Hebrew going under all the pressures of ministry, family, seminary training, and so on. So what I've asked them to do is try and do 5 minutes a day. You might think 5 minutes a day is nothing. It's actually jolly hard to keep up faithfully 5 minutes a day in every language you've learned. But if they do that, they will read the whole book of Ruth in the 5 weeks that they're away, at a rate of about 2.3 verses a day, which is something which by the end of that time, they'll be well capable of doing. 4, as we said, will then remain in Cuba to carry on teaching. 6 will return for next term. What is next term? If this term we manage to get to the point where in an hour we could read about 20 verses each day with lots of other stuff that we're learning as well in terms of grammar, and if during the term break I'm expecting 2.3 verses a day, but really in 5 minutes, the next term will begin at the leisurely pace of reading the whole book of Deuteronomy in 2 weeks, which works out at about 3.4 chapters per day. So next term is going to be classes in exegesis, how do Hebrew stories work and how do we read them, and then lots of experience at speed reading. Now the point of all this is if you're going to preach once a week from the Old Testament, and it takes you more than an hour just to read the passage, you can't do it. This is why so many pastors in this country give up Hebrew, because they leave seminary and it takes them 5 hours to read the passage they're going to preach on. Nobody's got that level of time. So going back this term, they're competent to teach, but not really to keep preaching regularly and using the language regularly. That's the aim for term 2, to have a tolerable and pleasurable level of teaching Hebrew. Fernando.
Sorry. Good afternoon, my brothers and sisters. My name is Fernando Flores Sanchez. I'm married to Gladys Sardinas. We have 4 children, two of whom live with us. A girl of 26 and a boy of 16. I was born in Pinar del Rio, but I live now in Havana, where I am the pastor of a young church. I am Baptist. and graduated from the Baptist Theological Seminary in Havana. We are focusing in winning of Christ the community in which we live through a program of evangelism and discipleship, together with other ministers of worship, service in the church and community. Our emphasis is in Christian community. When I return to Cuba, I will begin to teach some of what I've learned here is the leadership of our seminary kids. I also be open to serve in other denominations to help them with the Hebrew language wherever it is necessary, with the aim of teaching the original language in which the majority of the Old Testament was written. Tyndale House has been a unique experience to find myself in the most important place for theological research in the world. It is something that I never thought would happen in my life as a servant of Jesus Christ. It is indescribable. This is my first trip out of Cuba, and in all honesty, I have no words to describe the extent of so many emotions, so much involvement, and so much security for the people in this country. To see so much history in front of me has impacted me greatly. I am sure I will never forget this experience. The thing I miss most about Cuba is my family. I know that Cuba has the potential to produce PhDs and DAs in theology, but there are many limitations to us achieving this. My heart burns with a deep thankfulness for the efforts made by you all and your churches to enable this course to take place. And I am available to return for future courses in good permits and give me the chance. Give the level you achieve with professors and tutors of such high academic level. The level is excellent, so we could serve the God of the universe in a better way. It's a brotherly love in Christ.
Finally, I would like to introduce the founder and chairman of Cuba para Cristo, Cuba for Christ, Carl Chambers.
Thank you. That's a very grand title for a group of people who are all volunteers and has no real organisational structure to speak of. Cuba for Christ started about 20 years ago, and we're extremely grateful for partnership that is represented here in a whole variety of ways. I don't know everyone. I know there's a whole pile of people outside of here who will also have been supporting the project and the work. We began, as I say, about 20 years ago, really as a result of a couple of people visiting Cuba and wanting to help the church then. And the aim has always been, look, if anyone's interested in Cuba, come and be part and support as you can through prayer, through giving, through contacts, through networks, through who knows. And as God has led, we're having an impact that is very, very humbling. About 10 years ago, 10 or 15 years ago, we became part of Latin Link on the basis that we don't want to reinvent the wheel, and Latin Link has a commitment to mission in Latin America. So we're part of Latin Link officially, although sort of get up to things as we feel led, and particularly as the church in Cuba leads. Our aim is not to be imperialists. I think Cuba's had enough of that, as many countries in Latin America. Our aim is to serve, and so we go asking, what do you need? And that's a permanent question, and 90% of the time the answer is given to things that we can't possibly supply. That's okay, but God does open the door for some things. And there's always been a particular focus on word ministry, on the Bible, because that's what's going to be, that's what unites Christians, and of course that's how people come to know the living God through Jesus, if we focus on the word. We happen to have helped on other things, so through friends and contacts in Cuba, we provided money after hurricane relief. We send medicines that we get wholesale in this country. I can supply you drugs, but only if you'll take them to Cuba, for instance, prescription drugs. So there's a whole variety of things. We've sent journals in the past, and we've got networks to be able to print books. In fact, there's going to be a few thousand will be printed next month as a result of some money actually coming in from Australia. So we're very, very happy to help with that. About 10 years ago, there was a series of lectures from people we'd encouraged to send to go and do Bible classes or Bible courses for a week. And out of that came the introduction of the Moore College course, which is from Sydney. And there's 1,000 people across the island studying that, often in just small churches. One of our principles is to work across denominations. I think that mainly that's because of church unity and the importance of fellowship, and particularly in Cuba, where the history has been one of denominations not talking to each other. That's not criticising. That's saying if you come from a country where you can't trust who's in the room, of course you don't talk to other people. And yet the gospel will unite us. And so Moore College, for instance, with Mockram, we've insisted that if ever they run a course, it must have more than one denomination. The reason there are more than one denomination here is because that was our principle. So when Stefan came up with the idea last summer and shared this Hebrew boot camp with me, I was very excited, and said we have no idea how this could be funded. Who's going to pay your wages and provide for your family, which is very important. Who's going to fund the flights and bring the people over, and who knows? But it was the right thing to do under God, and astoundingly, you guys are here, and we're thrilled at that, a provision from God in ways that are just remarkable and are very, very humbling. Today would have been the birthday of someone who was called home last year to glory, who left an amount to enable a number of people to come. So it's a great day to celebrate today. We've been helping with masters, for instance, trying to develop masters people training. And that was between two different seminaries. Hopefully that will be a bit larger in the future now. But the aim is to maximise, as you see, the country's a big country, travel is difficult. So if you can train some people well, then their productivity is huge. 3 people here last summer, teaching 50 before they had a chance to think about coming back. Over these 20 years, every year that I've met Cubans, they've always said, now is the time to help Cuba. Now is the time. It's just I don't think now is always the time, and now particularly has got to be the time. Because now is today, so now is the time. But also, given the changes between Cuba and the US, the growth of the church, the relative lack of leadership, many still leave the country. There's a very young leadership. This is the Hebrew faculty, basically, of Cuba, relatively young. Now certainly is the time, because there are very, very hungry people who are under-resourced and yet keen to learn. And I think before the walls do come down and the doors open, now is a tremendous opportunity. So I want to say thank you to God for being our God and bringing us together. Thank you to you for being part of this in whatever way you have. Massive thanks to Tyndale House. I think also to Stefan. It's going to have been pretty hard, isn't it? I know that you Cuban friends have been, I don't want to use the word grumbling, but there'll be times when you weren't so happy. He was working you hard, and yet look where you've got. Very, very impressive, but that won't have been easy for Stefan to keep going. So we thank God for that. And we thank God for the chance to serve and bless the churches in Cuba. Great, I'll hand you back to Stefan, or Pete.
Well, yeah, just a few things to say. That I'll be taking a tour of the library shortly, and we've also got some brochures about Tyndale House I'd love you all to have. just to thank you all again for coming. Thank our partners in Cuba to Christ. Thanks, Stefan. Thanks to the Dutch Mission and others who supported. And thank you guys and your families. You all mentioned this is the biggest pain. The hardest thing is leaving your family. So let's close in prayer, and I will specifically pray for the families of our friends and our church situation. Lord, we thank you for bringing us together, and we thank you that we have had some opportunity of being involved in the extension of your kingdom. And Lord, I just thank you for all of our friends here. I pray that you will give them the strength to keep going with the remaining studies, and as they go back to keep their Hebrew up, reading through Ruth and teaching many people and managing with all the busyness of life. Lord, thank you for their families, those lovely families, and just pray that you will bless each one of them. And where those families have missed a father or a mother in this time, that you would give them every strength as they return. Lord, may marriages be stronger, families closer, and Lord, may you make up to them what they have sacrificed. Lord, we just bless you and thank you that you enable us to be involved, and we ask for your help in everything going forward. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.